Right now, this very second, you're using something pretty incredible inside your head. It's this mental workspace that lets you do basically everything, like holding a phone number in your mind while you look for a pen, or figuring out what you're going to say next in a conversation. We call it working memory. And here's the thing. For decades, scientists have been in this quiet but honestly intense battle over one fundamental question. What is this thing really?
So the whole debate really boils down to this one central question. Is that mental workspace in your brain a single general-purpose workbench that you use for every single task, or is it more like a toolbox, one filled with all these specialized instruments for handling words, images, and locations completely separately?
Okay, let's break these two big ideas down. The one big workbench theory, well, it sees working memory as the single all-purpose system. Just think of it like one big pool of mental energy you have to draw from for absolutely everything. But the specialized toolbox model, that one suggests we have multiple, very specific systems that all work together. It's kind of like having separate tools, one for language, another for visuals, and a whole other one for spatial stuff. So, which one is it? To try and get to the bottom of this, scientists started hunting for clues. And one of the biggest clues came from a pretty unexpected place, a massive internet study. And what it showed, well, it threw a major wrench into that whole one workbench idea. Just look at that number for a second. Over 111,000 participants. This wasn't some small study in a lab. This was a colossal data set. It let researchers see patterns in how our working memory changes across our entire lives with, just unprecedented clarity. And a really dramatic pattern jumped right out from all that data. So get this, our performance on visual memory tasks, things like remembering patterns, it starts to decline in pretty steeply right after age 20. But our verbal memory, like remembering a string of numbers, that stays remarkably stable until we're around 65. And that, right there, leads to a really logical question. If working memory was just one single thing, one general workbench, shouldn't all of its abilities go downhill at the same rate? The fact that they don't, well, that's a huge piece of evidence suggesting that our toolbox of different mental skills might just age at very different speeds. So all this conflicting evidence, it was really setting the stage for a scientific showdown. The whole community basically decided, okay, that's it. It's time to stop debating and design one single, decisive experiment that can finally settle this thing once and for all. And they called it an adversarial collaboration. The idea was actually brilliant. You get the main scientists from the competing theories to work together. They would all design an experiment so perfectly crafted that the results would have no choice but to support one theory over the others. It was designed to force a resolution. The plan was super ambitious and crystal clear. Step 1, pit the 3 leading models of working memory against each other. Step 2, design a definitive experiment to test their predictions head-to-head. And Step 3, find the single undisputed winner. Everyone expected one model to just come out on top. So after all that meticulous planning, after getting the greatest minds in the field to battle it out in the ultimate intellectual cage match, what happened? What was the result? It was a complete surprise, a total shocker. The big experiment was inconclusive. The researchers themselves literally said, quote, "No clear winner seems to emerge." The one showdown that was supposed to end the debate for good, it just deepened the mystery, and it forced everyone to start asking a completely different kind of question. And this is where the story gets really interesting, because the failure to find a single winner actually led to this powerful new idea. What if the goal was never about finding one single correct theory? What if they were all just looking at the same thing, but from totally different angles? This brings us to this really powerful concept called levels of explanation. It's the idea that, hey, maybe multiple theories can be true and useful at the exact same time simply because they're describing the same complex thing at different levels of detail or, for different reasons. Think about it like this. A satellite map of a city versus a subway map. The satellite map gives you that huge, big picture, domain general view, right? The subway map shows you all the specific components and how they connect. Now, is one of them wrong? Of course not. They're both totally correct and incredibly useful just for answering different kinds of questions. And that insight, it changes everything. Instead of seeing these theories as rivals fighting to the death, we can start to see them as complementary pieces of a much, much larger puzzle. The path forward isn't about competition anymore. It's about integration.
You can see this exact same pattern all across the history of science. In physics, Einstein didn't prove Newton was wrong. He just created a more complete map that explained more stuff. In biology, DNA sequencing built on the work of Watson and Crick, which built on Mendel's work. The greatest scientific leaps almost always come from building on and integrating what came before, not just throwing it out.
So what this really means is that the future of understanding our own working memory probably isn't about crowning a winner. It's about combining that satellite view of the workbench with the subway map of the toolbox to create a much more complete, more useful picture of how we actually think. Which kind of leaves us with this final bigger thought. This whole story about working memory, it's really a story about science itself. It challenges us to think beyond simple right or wrong answers and ask a much bigger question. What if the ultimate goal of science isn't just for one person or one theory to be right, but for all of us to build a more complete, more nuanced, and more powerful picture of the world together?